So somebody was asking me about, what evidence do I have for Greenland? And they meant I thought they were talking about my evidence for Donald Trump having a claim to it. Again, Donald Trump has a claim to it because, see right here, this isn't a good picture of it, but right there above, right next to my finger, King Christian's land. Donald Trump, that's his lineage. And this King Frederick land up here, that is part of the monarchy of King Christian. They're related, okay? So it's his lineage, okay? I mean, he goes back to royalty of Denmark, Swedish, Scotland, okay, all through the West. That's not what this video is about. I said that Greenland, I believe, was once the Garden of Eden. First of all, it's the closest to the circle of the earth. We know the Bible says that God sits above the circle of the earth. We know he was at one time in the garden with them. And we know we know from history, the flood caused mass disruption, changed the graphics of all the world. Yet Greenland is still closest to the circle of the earth. And yet it's not been a very inhabited place. But let's just look, so just remember this picture, okay? Would have been after the flood. So try to picture it here, Greenland's, here. But at one time, it was here. It was at the very top. It was at the circle of the earth prior to the flood. It says in the Bible that the windows of heaven open in the firmament and God lets the rain in. If you look into Greenland, there's I shouldn't say Greenland, but the Arctic Circle in general, the 4 main waterways come from there that go throughout the oceans, okay? But in the firmament are the windows of heaven where snow and rain, it's in the Bible, okay? I look at the Bible as a history book. It's more accurate than most of our history books. It really is. It's just that Democrats and people that aren't Christians, it's the only God they ever hate is the biblical one. They'll accept every other God because they know they're all false. So just picture at one time, given God doesn't change his position, he's still above the circle of the earth. But after he flooded the earth, of course it would have shifted Greenland down. And none of those lands are at the circle at the very top. But Greenland is the closest to it. And it's the most uninhabitable through the years, because God eventually shut the Garden of Eden off completely. It's even made to seem that Cain and Abel were working the fields in the garden. It was obviously Adam and Eve were tossed out. But prior to Cain killing Abel, it seemed like they were coming in working the land. And after Cain killed Abel, Cain was sent even further east than Adam and Eve, which is likely how you brought your Middle East into the whole picture, okay? Because God had said, you're going to go further, even further away from me. Because both Adam and Cain were the curse of the earth. But God said he'd protect Cain. He did. He told him that. Even though after he killed his brother. But he said, I want you far away from me as possible. Go even further than your parents. So then when the flood happens, okay, that's all prior to the flood. Then when the flood happened, everything shifted. So Greenland was likely at the circle of the earth. There's a reason we call it the Arctic Circle. It's the circle of the earth. God uses the earth like his footstool. The windows in heaven are in the firmament because there's water above the firmament. Now, given that we have made so much space exploration, was the firmament broken? Many think it was broken during the millennium. That's why I think the millennial reign happened. Is because I think the firmament has already been broken, but the sky hasn't been rolled back. Like, here's the thing. The very first light, real light, that was the very first thing that God created was Jesus. He's the light. He is the real light. The sun and the moon are artificial lights. The sun reflects or the moon reflects the sun and gives us some light in the evening, but it's all leaves shadows. Even the sun, when it, beats down on a tree, you can find shadows to, shade. The true light is Jesus. That permeates everything. There is no shadows with the true light. So the sun and the moon are actual artificial lights in the sky, which is why when God returns, he rolls the artificial tent of the sky back like a scroll, as it talks about. And then the true light is ultimately heaven's. That's the real light. But until then, he's still in control of the weather. I mean, I know we have people that have manipulated weather. I mean, that's clear with hurricanes, them being able to go into hurricanes and track stuff and the things they can do with crops. But ultimately, God is the ultimate, he's the storehouses of snow and water. So he is the only way you can get land to shift. So it is common sense that Greenland, because it's been not a very inhabitable place forever, it's a very hard place to live, has been made that way for a reason. But there's a reason it's all melting, because God's returning. In fact, as I've said, God's already returned. He just hasn't revealed himself. He has. I know most Christians, they're too hung up with the church and they're waiting for some mark of the beast. Yeah, that was the denarius system. We've been living under the season of the beast, where everybody's deceived. I mean, anybody who doesn't think they've been deceived is really lost. So we've been living under the deception of the beast. His biggest deception was getting you to believe that you're waiting for the Antichrist to run when he's been the running the system. That should be obvious when we have a mass globalist trafficking problem that obviously Donald Trump has been dealing with for the past 10 years. All of these big major things being exposed and also being taken care of. Yeah, and it's the North, it all makes sense with the way the globe is God sits above the circle of the earth, the Arctic Circle. I mean, everybody's so focused on Antarctica. No, the things that are important is in the Arctic Circle. That's the reason China wants it, Russia wants it, and it's like, so it's interesting that what Trump is trying to do is shore up the Western Hemisphere, because he's doing God's will. So it only makes sense that when you have this flood, the mass flood that shifted everything in the earth, come down, and the closest those things would have came down to that it hit was places like Greenland, then it would have caused Greenland to shift, like everything shifted.